Strike your colors, Penguin!
Oh, we have not yet begun to fight! Attack!
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso. Back at it again with another Batman video, this time talking about the first ever Batman movie. Now for some reason, a lot of the time Tim Burton's Batman is credited as being the Dark Knight's first outing on the big screen. But the truth of the matter is that there was one that came out years and years before it. A movie which also saw Batman go toe-to-toe with the Clown Prince of Crime, as well as a fury of his other foes as well. I'm talking of course about Batman, the movie. This movie is based on the famous, and hilariously in hindsight, infamous 1966 show. The film would hit theaters only 2 months after the first season of the show wrapped up on air, which is kinda crazy when you think about it. The show gets picked up, and immediately after completing its first 34 episodes, the studio then makes the decision to make a movie. Batman the movie feels very much like a product of the product. It's a solid representation of the season that came before it, as well as the 2 seasons that would follow after. It feels exactly like the show, just brought to a grander stage with a bigger budget, which I guess is exactly what it is. I know this might seem strange to highlight, but I'm coming off the heels of watching the Batman vs. Dracula movie, which was a movie that did not do a good job of representing the show that it was based on. So I really want to rain down my praise on this film for perfectly portraying the show of the same name. And I'll be real with you, this is far from my favorite version of the character. I think by now, everyone who's familiar with either myself or the channel knows that I prefer broody Batman to campy Caped Crusader. But I've really come to appreciate, and maybe even love, this live-action Saturday morning cartoon version of the hero. I think it's harmless, goofy fun with the IP. And I do have some nostalgia for it from having grown up watching reruns on TV Land. This series may not have a lot of brains, but it does have a lot of heart. There was definitely a point in my life where I found this cool to hate, but in my later years I find it very endearing. It's something to just turn your brain off and watch. Of course it's not an accurate representation of where the characters ended up now, but it is the starting point for the character in major media, and it's interesting to look back on and see how much the brand has evolved. Now if you're going into this with limited knowledge of the original series, I would still say that it's probably a fair starting point, especially considering that the movie was initially intended to act as a cinematic pilot of sorts, an introduction for the rest of the series. Of course, ultimately that didn't wind up happening, and this takes place later in the series, but it's still an easy watch and not hampered down with its connection to a wider continuity. So if this is somehow your first Batman 66 outing, what you need to know is that nothing ever makes sense, and that's alright. You will never be able to solve the Riddler's riddles, because the answers to his question lie in no semblance of sense. Characters will jump to ridiculous conclusions following severe lapses in logic, and yet somehow, they will still arrive at the right answer. Like take this scene for example, where all the do-gooders are trying to figure out the identity of the villain responsible for getting one over on the dynamic duo.
Pretty fishy what happened to me on that ladder. The Penguin.
It happened at sea. See? C for Catwoman.
That exploding shark was pulling my leg.
The Joker.
All adds up to a sinister riddle. What, the Riddler?
The 4 of them.
Like, what do you say to that? They all just made predictions based on, let's be nice and say circumstantial evidence, and immediately they treat their pondering as if it's fact. And because this is Batman 66, it is. Or how about the little masks that the villain wear in this scene? Like, is that a fashion choice, or are they trying to conceal their identity? I mean, Riddler and Catwoman wear those masks throughout the series, so I'm not taking issue with their fashion choices. But Joker and Penguin do not. Is this them attempting to commit a crime and not get caught? Because you're both still wearing your full villain costumes, and you're not doing a whole lot to not stand out. What with Joker's green hair, white face, red lips, and painted mustache, and the Penguin's nose and top hat, you're pretty unmistakable. I don't know, this always seemed like a strange choice to me. Maybe they're just trying to show solidarity within the ranks of their bickering brotherhood. I don't know. It's something that I've thought about way longer than I ever should. And I know I'll never get an answer to this, but this will never leave my mind. Or how about the fact that the Navy willfully, and without thought, gives the Penguin a submarine?
We haven't done anything foolish, have we?
Disposing of pre-atomic submarines.
Good day, Admiral.
Gosh,
I could go on, but there's really no need to because that's kind of the nature of the beast here. This may be live action, but it's still somehow more of a cartoon than the actual Batman cartoons that would follow. It's ridiculous, it's bizarre, it's shamelessly goofy. It's not serious at all, and yet the material kind of takes itself seriously to some degree. The stakes are raised, and we're really supposed to feel for the characters when they're in these situations, and not just point and laugh at the jokes delivered throughout. These are the things that I absolutely hated about this canon as a kid, but love as a man. The criminal underworld is now united in Gotham City. Seeing the likes of the Caped Crusaders' most sinister arch-enemies combine their efforts to best the hero and make the day theirs. The Joker, the Riddler, the Penguin, the Catwoman form an antagonistic alliance. The characters are unsurprisingly hilariously accurate to the Golden Age versions of characters, which is no real shock as they're being played by the very actors that made these roles famous, for the most part. The exception, of course, being Catwoman. And I really want to credit her actress Lee Merriweather here, as she's the one who's stepping into a world that she's unfamiliar with. And yet, despite being the proverbial new girl in town, she comes off as if she's had residency here for years. Whereas all the other villains and their actors originated from the show, she is the one actor amongst them that is a recast. And yet she blends in with the bunch perfectly. It should also be noted that Catwoman has a fair amount to do in this movie. I think more emphasis is actually put on her than the rest of the baddies, as she's not only Catwoman, thief, and supervillain, but she's also in disguise as the potential love of Bruce's life. She plays the part with all the confidence in the world, and never once does she feel out of place, despite not originally being from that place. Which is probably why Lee Merriweather would show back up again later on the show, this time as a different character, when original Catwoman actress Julie Newmar would come back to reprise her role. Anytime I've watched this movie, I've always found the oblivious Commodore to be absolutely adorable. He has no idea what's going on, and quite frankly, neither do I most of the time when I watch this movie. But we're both fairly happy in not knowing and enjoying our experience in spite of our lack of knowledge. I gotta give it to the movie, the Batman-Catwoman romance is laughably wonderful, with Bruce being completely smitten with her in disguise, and completely unaware of the blatant foolery. Although, to be fair, maybe Batman's just a little bit thrown off by the recast. The villains used the cat as bait to kidnap Bruce Wayne, in the hopes that Batman would come save the billionaire, which obviously doesn't happen for the very obvious reason that the two are one and the same. But I just love that everyone is so intellectually incompetent that nobody can figure out the obvious. The villains can't seem to figure out that Wayne is very obviously Batman, despite him laying hands on them in ways that only Batman could. I don't know, maybe the villains were thrown off by the lack of hitboxes saying ow and biff. The alleged world's greatest detective can't figure out that Kitka is Catwoman. I can't figure out why I'm watching this movie. It's a comedy of errors with a festival of fools. Although I think it just makes things that much funnier when later in the same film, Batman and Robin can very clearly see through one of Penguin's disguises. And it's a disguise that looks like it has much more effort put into it than Catwoman throwing on a leopard print hat. Now you may think to yourself, why can they see through one but not the other? And the answer, of course, is don't think about it. Like I said, the only thing about Batman 66 that makes sense is that nothing in Batman 66 makes sense. They play by their own rules, and they're literally writing and then rewriting the playbook as they go along. And it's then even funnier when Catwoman randomly trips over, drops her mask, and reveals the ruse. The movie takes a brief pause to really revel in this revelation. And just, I'm without words. It's so strange. The patronizing personalities conflict and contrast throughout. Despite their shared interest and hatred of Batman, this team isn't as united as they'd like to say. While they do work together throughout, their differences are clearly working against them in their union. Personally, I think watching this gaggle of giggles, chuckles, and evil laughs interact, undoubtedly the highlight of the film. Having all these larger-than-life personalities all somehow fit into one room. To me, that alone makes this movie worth the watch. While there is a whole lot of this movie I ironically enjoy, I unironically like watching this circle of villains plot, plan, and fail. The banter, the double entendres, the constant alliteration. I just love it. I love all of it. I could watch it all day. The villains in this really don't even have a plan per se, but they have a plethora of plans. Each one going awry because most are not well thought out. I like how Batman doesn't even really have to foil their plans. They just kind of do it themselves. Like the villains dehydrating henchmen into piles of dust. This way they can have them infiltrate the Batcave. Then having them rehydrated only to compose into antimatter whenever they make contact with anything else. Eventually the villains take out United World leaders with their dehydrators, but the crime-fighting duo manages to save the piles of dust that the world's learned to call a Security Council. But through an unfortunate series of event, singular, that is no fault of their own, when they repair the council, there are some noticeable differences, with each council member taking on traits of those they share a table with. And this is actually how this movie ends, with Batman openly hoping that this flub-up will cause more good than harm, perhaps make for a more United Nations. Yeah, I don't really know about that, Bruce. That all just sounds like wishful thinking to me, if I'm being honest. And you thought The Batman was the only movie to end with Batman failing. Not so, because that is the end of 1966's Batman the Movie. So let's get this out of the way. Time has obviously not done the movie any favors. Quality-boosting art artifacts mostly highlights flaws that were otherwise previously harder to spot. Like when I watch the opening scene, all I'm thinking is, who is that? Who's in the Robin suit here? Because I know that's not Burt Ward. That's Bartholomew Adult Man. I don't like that. I don't want any part of this. Get him off my screen. The fight scenes are, well, yeah, you remember what the fight scenes are like. They're obviously not good, but they are hilarious. And they're a big part of what this series would become known for. I mean, I don't like them, but in that same breath, I wouldn't have it any other way. Because that's what you come to expect from this Batman. So, ultimately, would I recommend this movie? Undoubtedly. If you're looking for good old clean fun, this is the Batman film for you. There's laughs to be had with and also at the expense of this movie. It sits at a runtime that isn't too demanding of its audience, and it's not something you have to devote an excess amount of time to or even attention for. You just turn it on, go about your day, and have some laughs during. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Batman the movie is just fun. It's probably not the Batman you know, it's the one that your parents or, well, more accurately, grandparents know. I think this should be seen by old Batman fans, and I hope that on some level, it could be appreciated by old Batman fans. I think anyone of any age can watch this and get some enjoyment out of it, whether it be for the reasons that this movie intended, well, that's really up to the viewer. But I think that a lot of people would find this highly entertaining so long as they entered without cynicism and knew what they were getting into. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more Batman 66 content, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
With that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.